Okay, hello, hello, hello. Let's see who's awake right now. I know I shouldn't be. It's 5 a.m. here. Well, close to 5:40. It's been a long night. So, I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to get online to see who's around, who's available. We've actually got a really important conversation to have today. And it really came to me as kind of a eureka moment because I'm the kind of person who, see, I share a lot of stuff about, um, well, whatever it is I feel called to share, but that doesn't necessarily mean I talk about my personal process a lot. And I am the kind of person who will very, very, very much fixate on something until I get a solution to it or a kind of breakthrough to it. And I've really been fixated on the conversation surrounding race. And this is not a recent thing for me. I've been crusading against this ever since I was a kid. All right. So, this isn't a fad for me, and it's certainly not something I just picked up because it's a hot topic. But in looking at this conversation, I mean, I'm trying to find solutions. I'm trying to find ways that people can actually have the conversation without falling into the same camp of, black versus white, aggressor versus victim, and so on and so forth. Although I get accused of doing that a lot, it's usually because people don't understand my process and want to project whatever they're going through on me or anyone who's talking about it. So, I have recently been in conversation with a lot of people who are very triggered by the race question, and they keep asking me, all right, if you're so great, find a way through, find a different way to have the conversation. And I think I finally have some insight as to what that could look like. I am stalling a little bit just to give more people the chance to log on and say hello. Hello, Ramsey. Hello, James. Hello, Ultraviolet Xeon. I like your name. What on earth is a Xeon? Um, but effect and hello, Glow. So let's give people a minute to come in. Hello, Ruby. And in the meanwhile, let's see if she's in the mood. Kitty's in front of me, licking herself. No, she's not in the mood. But she's been a bit naughty today. She didn't want to take a medicine. But we'll try again. Hello, Southern Oracle. Hello, Rising Star. Hello, Cheryl. I would say it's probably a good time for us to get started into the meat of, well, for the vegans out there, the substance of the topic. Hello, oh, the Unstoppable. And Southern Oracle says, hello, Kitty. Kitty looks at you as Kitty does. So, well, as I said, today the conversation is about a eureka moment I had on the race question. And like I was saying, I'm the kind of person who focuses on a thing very, very, very intensely until I hit that sweet spot of breakthrough. So that's why I've been featuring it a lot on my Facebook, on my YouTube, and why I've turned my attention to this because there was a nut that needed to be cracked. And this is what came to me. I was in conversation with someone who, was very triggered by the fact I'm talking about this, and she wasn't nice to me. I wasn't nice to her. People, I'm not a saint. And when it comes to defending people of color and their right to have a voice, I am definitely not nice. Um, Ooh, someone says they can't hear anything. Is anyone else having audio problems? Hello, Soul Whisperer. Ah, I see. Thank you for the explanation, Ultraviolet. Yeah, I think, okay, good, good. People hear me. Alaya, I think you may need to turn up your speakers. It's working. I've got confirmation of that. Ramsey also confirms that, so it might be an issue with your speakers. Maybe try looking on your phone. So, welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the space. Welcome to this conversation. So, let's recap a little bit for the newcomers. We're talking about a breakthrough that I had with respect to the race question. As I'm talking to this really very triggered person, and of course, she's yelling at me, I'm yelling at her. And you know what? Again, not a saint, never claimed to be a saint, not going to be a saint in all likelihood. Plus, saints live very, very tortured lives more often than not. But finally, the energy kind of just shifted in the middle, and I kind of went, okay, so this is what it's about. So See, the issue was she was very upset with me because I could not take her trauma seriously, which sounds terrible on the surface, but when I'm trying to protect a space where I'm trying to feature the voices of people of color, and white people go, but I'm wounded and I'm injured and bad things happen to me, and I'm just like, dude. Oh, hello, can people hear me now? Is it still working, or is what I'm about to say so threatening YouTube wants to shut me down? It's possible. Can people hear me now? I'm back. Great, great. See, this is a good sign. Well, thank you all for your patience. So, like I was saying, the insight that I got was very telling. She just did not get why I was trying to protect the space. And, naturally she started calling me a racist and, spreading hate, da 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 da. And finally it hit me. I could not take this white woman's trauma seriously. And it's not because I didn't believe what she had gone through. It's not because I was disrespecting the fact that she was from one of those sub ethnic groups that actually did bear the brunt of colonization as well. I mean, it's not just about the Brits. You got to see what they did to the Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, the Cornish, and, the other indigenous groups that occupied the British Isles before, everything got homogenized. So there's a lot of history there. So, when I'm talking about white people, I'm not exactly erasing that, but I still could not connect with her. And everything she was saying just felt like an invasion into what I was trying to create as a safe space. So I'm thinking to myself, why is this not working? And finally, it hits me. It's the way she's saying it. And I'm not talking about being articulate. I'm not talking about being eloquent or expressive. I'm not talking about having facts to back up a person's statement. That's not what I mean at all. There's just a certain way that she was making a stake or a claim in my space that absolutely screamed the word colonizer, even though she was trying to, in her own words, challenge me as to why, her trauma was not being recognized. And that was the problem. She walked and talked and sounded exactly like a colonizer. Now, when I'm talking about colonizer, I'm talking about specifically the types of rhetorical strategies, political decisions, military movements that stripped away indigenous people from their land, from their traditional beliefs, from their language, and tried to supplant this idea of white superiority in so called inferior races. And they have a certain MO, they have a certain style of rhetoric, a certain ideology, a certain style of self presentation that when any person of color sees, they're going to remember this and go, shit, it's the same thing all over again. And we actually see this same kernel, this same rhetoric that, the same kernel, the same rhetoric that that enslaved people all over the world. It just comes back again. It's been filtered through into political discourse. It's been filtered through in universal norms. It's especially surrounding political culture, bureaucracy, managerial culture, how we're expected to perform in the public domain. It has literally filtered through every domain of life, which is why people of color, especially, are seen as uncivilized, too rowdy, too passionate, too overbearing, or too something, too whatever for systems of structure that exist. So, I mean, to give you some context, and this is why I think about all these things. I mean, I'm not saying this to brag or shit, okay? I'm just trying to give you a bit of context. My 5 year PhD was on the dramaturgy of micro sociological interactions. In other words, to look at how people constructed their moment to moment interface with others. And I did this in the context of the Indian Parliament. And so I was literally using ethnographic tools to try and understand how people constructed identities and how those identities interacted with one another. And I'm not saying this was all my conclusion. I was also a team of people I was also building off some of the larger directions that the team was working towards. But the general gist is that there is a very colonial understanding of how people must speak, make claims, assert themselves to be seen as legitimate, powerful, authoritative, wise, and having the right to rule over others. There is a language, a rhetoric, and in short, a dramaturgy of colonialism. I am coining that phrase. If anyone uses it elsewhere, they gotta pay me royalties. A dramaturgy of colonialism. And in fact, I think I will write about this, and that's probably what I'm going to call it. The problem is, descendants of colonizers, people talk to speak the language, walk like a colonizer, talk like a colonizer, look like a colonizer, lay claim to space and resources like a colonizer. They will be doing it even without realizing it, and that is the problem. So even when someone is genuinely trying to look for help or trying to say, hey, I'm a human being too, I'm hurting as well, when they present themselves with that dramaturgy, or rather that dramaturgical repertoire, people of color who have seen this coming a mile away will not be able to recognize it. And that bloody hell is why we respond the way we do, because we're trying to create safe spaces, and at the same time someone using the same strategies that were used to silence and enslave our ancestors comes back saying, I bleed. What are we supposed to do? We're going to be like, nah, first you tried occupying the space as aggressor, now you're victim, next you're what? And that's why we get angry. And very often our anger is seen as, again, this is a colonizer's move, uncivilized, barbaric, unjust, uneducated, illiterate, unwise, and now unspiritual, unenlightened, triggered, da 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 da. We're basically being gaslit into this. So the one part of this section is dramaturgy. It is identifying the sequence of words, of bodily movements, of and this is the thing, it's not even so much the ideas. A lot of white people who are into metaphysics and stuff see themselves as very woke, very liberal, and yes, people who on paper would definitely say no to racism, right? But the problem is, the ideals sound great, the embodied performance of that ideal is not. I'm using the word performance as per the queer theorist Judith Butler, who talked about performativity, and performativity understood identities as something that you create through reiterated actions over time. So there is a performative component of how certain identities, certain bodies, certain ways of seeing and thinking and acting get reinforced with privilege. We are conditioned to see certain ways of asserting the self as being superior to others. So when others are trying to create a counter to that, they're going to see that as an invasion, which is why POC, people of color, respond so severely when they feel invaded. This is what's going on. This is what white people do not get. And in fact, I don't know if anyone has articulated it this way. If they have, send me resources. I need to write an article, please. And if they haven't, then I gotta go write it, because it's been bugging me. It's like, how are people not seeing this? So, that's the first element of this is dramaturgy slash performativity. They both come together. Two, the second element of this is genetic triggering. Now, there is this woman, wonderful, wonderful scholar. I believe her name is Joy DeGruy, and she has a book on this. But I saw a video where she was talking about post-traumatic slave syndrome, and it was a real eye-opener. So in the video, this woman was talking about how, or I should say the scholar was talking about how people of African American descent still carried out the same kind of verbal and social cues that their ancestors had performed, had enacted to actually prevent themselves from coming to harm. So a very direct example that she gave, and this is a person of color, this is not being imposed from the outside, so to speak. The very direct example she gave was, in those times, if a white overseer was looking at a woman and her son, and he noticed the son was growing taller each day and getting stronger each day, if he were to go over to talk to his mom, the mom would be downplaying the child. No, 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 he's not that special. He's dumb. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. She would say anything in her power to get the overseer to not take her child away to work long hours in the fields. So that has actually carried down. And the example that was given in this video was that if you were to compare the way a white mother talked about um, her child, my child does this, is number one here, doing this, excellent at that, and that, vis-a-vis a black mom who might be saying, well, he's all right, but he's a pain in the ass. I'm not at all going to try the accent, but, this is the core of it, the gist of it. And the reason why they would do this is whether or not they realize it, genetically speaking, they're still trying to evade being seen. So, this is a very profound idea when you think about it. People are subconsciously, dramaturgically, and performatively enacting the same identities that they inherited from their ancestors. So, one set of people was actually taught how to hide because they didn't want to be abused. Whereas the other set of people, the white side, so to speak, and again, these are large categories. I'm fully and perfectly aware of the fact that not all white people are colonizers. There are indigenous white people. There are groups that bore the brunt of British colonialism because they were right next to them. The Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, the Cornish people, and so on and so on. And of course, not all black people are saints. There's a lot of colorism and racism even within those subset of communities. So what I'm saying is, when I'm talking about this dichotomy, it is for a heuristic purpose. I don't want you to think that I'm trying to reify this. It is a heuristic purpose. But I can't be saying this each time I do a video. I just assume that you people know that I know what I'm talking about. So, on the one side, a black mom is going to be enacting those behaviors to protect her son from being noticed by someone who could exploit him. Of course, the son doesn't know this and goes, why is my mom not proud of me? Which is an issue in itself. So, the white mom, on the other hand, is going to be talking about how her child excelled, how her child is the best, how her child did this and did this, because that's in her bloodline. So, if we were to look at the history of colonialism, how are colonizers presented? They're not talked about as repentant people. They're talked about as God's gift, bringing civilization to the natives. Da 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 da. That um, that way of self-presentation, to occupy space, to be seen as the person in charge, is what is subconsciously transmitted down the line. So this is when we're talking about, unpacking our trauma, when we're talking about, when we talk, and Paul Collins says, political correctness is the modern day Western imperialism. Brother, I could not agree more. So when we are talking about the bloodlines, when we're talking about the way trauma gets enacted and reenacted, we have to understand that these behaviors are happening subconsciously. So when a white person is trying to talk about their trauma and they are using all of the signaling that goes, well, I'm the best. I am the best at trauma. My trauma is number one. My trauma is better than anybody else. I have trauma. People of color are going to be like, no, we're not doing this shit again. Out. Just out. Because we've done a lot of work in actually educating ourselves to see where we fell into this whole colonial mud bucket and how we're supposed to get ourselves out of it. So, for people understanding just why POC are angry, this is why. So, in other words, white people are going to go, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Am I not supposed to talk at all? A lot of people of color would say, yes, sit down, shut up, and listen. That is part of the medicine. That's true. But the other part of it is when you look at how deeply the dramaturgy and performative influence of colonialism runs in your blood, to actually be a white person that is not causing harm by virtue of existing, you have to redefine whiteness. And this is what some white people tried to do. And it went horribly wrong. So to redefine whiteness, what did they do? They went into this new age spirituality thing, started taking from cultures left, right, and center, and we're left with a very confused jumble, which has really pissed off a lot of minorities, because that isn't a culture. That's literally picking and choosing this and doing that and saying, this is now mine. That is not how you make another culture. That is how you do colonialism version 2. Or maybe it's version 3, I don't know. There have been waves and waves and waves of it. So, for white people who are really interested in not inflicting more trauma on other people and on themselves, you've got to look at what is whiteness. What does it mean to be a white person? What should it mean? I mean, white people like to define themselves. Now, you got to understand, I studied in the West because I had to get out of my country. I started talking about race and I already got in trouble even when I was a teenager. And I realized if I keep this shit up, they're going to send me to jail. So I put myself through merit based scholarships and I studied political history and ideology and humanism and literature and all that kinds of stuff in the West. So that is where, despite having a very different emotional makeup, ideologically, I got to look at how this was being taught in academia and how this was being understood. So the intellectual understanding of whiteness is very, very idealistic and lofty and high-minded. Just look at the humanist movement, and this is what white culture is. That died a long time ago. In day to day performance, we can also easily see the movements and rallies of the far right in the United States as yet another symptom of white culture because it is such an empty space, dare I say, a bland space. There are different groups trying to, I'm going to use the word in irony here, trying to colonize the space of whiteness and make it into something that doesn't have to be. So if we were to actually look at some of the different spiritual traditions that white people had prior to colonization. And again, it doesn't just have to be British colonization. We also look at an erasure of pagan traditions from much earlier periods in history. We actually see that there is a great diversity in the tapestry that is whiteness. It's a shame that the person I was having a fight with is an Irish person because, no offense to anybody, and I don't think you would take offense, I always call Irish people, the white Indians because their history, their family issues, their social makeup and culture matches us very, very, very well. And I have a few Irish friends and I get them instantly and they get me instantly because it's a very similar background. But when we actually would look at a construction of whiteness from that perspective, we actually see it as very different than, uh, yes, Empress Light, I completely agree. The Irish are also the white blacks, there we go. But when we actually look at this construction that comes through this older tradition, this idea of whiteness that we have right now actually begins to crumble. See, when I talk about white people, it's not because I hate them. It's not true at all. It simply means that I am picking up the hegemonic nature of that culture and how it has actually become toxic. So, for you to actually participate in a conversation on race without retriggering not only your own colonizer genes, but the genes of the slave that you might be speaking to, without triggering those immediate racial responses, you have to unpack what being a white person means to you. And as you know, I've been traveling around in the United States, and that's actually where I started my university education. And there are different cultures on that subcontinent. Is it a subcontinent? North America is a continent, but the United States as a country is a decent sized subcontinent, I would say. So, just looking at that, you can already see so many different strands of whiteness that's trying to come together as one, and that's not working because it's an empty concept. It's already been colonized, it's already been written into certain norms and protocols, and people are trying to break out of it, but they are not managing. So, for white people to deal with their trauma, they have to first deal with the trauma of being white. And in no way am I, you know, decentering. In no way am I saying that the trauma of people of color is not as important. If you have followed me for long enough, you know that I am the last person to say that. But for white people to deal with their trauma, they must look at the trauma of being white. What does it actually mean? I I, hang on. Sarika says one day we'll drop the labels of black and white, as in old English, black means peached or pale and white means morally pure. I personally like black because black is, well, ancient, old, primordial, and the skies have always brought me comfort. And white is very interesting because it's when all the colors actually come together as one. So white is actually quite a pure energetic concept if you think about it. But at the same time, when we come back to the discussion, um, what needs to happen is really a separation of whiteness from the colonial experience. And that's tough shit. That's not something I can lead. I'm not a white person. This has to happen within white groups. They have to challenge themselves on their colonial responses, on their subconsciously imbibed ideas and methods of assertion and speech that are inherently white supremacy. And this is difficult because so many white people feel very, very disempowered. And they actually end up doing the whole thing over again. Let's just say what's happened with white feminism is very much a case in point. Something that started out with a lot of promise, but in practice is just doing the same thing that it was rallying against in the very, very beginning. So it's really time to strip away, to detangle, to unlink, in some sense, to also decolonize whiteness from itself. So yes, I really want to say it's going to piss people off, but the people who really want to play the victim card, sure, yes, 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 you are, but you're not victims of the angry POC. You're victims of your own culture because you haven't looked at it enough. So that's difficult to hear, but that's what needs to happen. Decolonizing whiteness from itself. And this is the work that every ally who wants to speak together, stand together, and become humanity once more, this is what needs to happen. It's not going to happen if we just try to transcend it all because we are all higher dimensional beings of light. That's not going to happen. If you're actually going to get to the root of what is is being harmed on this planet, you have to go to the root of it. You cannot just erase it with words. Star Wars influenced too many people. It's like, these are not the whites you are looking for. That's pretty much the way I find, new age dismissals of the race question. It's like they're trying to do the Jedi mind trick. It's not going to work because people are literally looking at you going, nah. But basically, when you actually face yourself, when you are actually humbled to the roots and origins of your own trauma, that's when you can actually talk to a person of color. Because at the end of the day, whilst I talk about this race stuff a lot, I mean, this is me you're talking about. When I look at a person, God knows how many lifetimes I look at in them, depending on whether or not it's needed. This color business is baloney, colonization is shit, and we've all been all kinds of things in all different times. But at the same time, we can't ignore the planet we currently live in and the bodies that we currently inhabit because this is the density we need to move through. So, yes, transcending all is one is possible, but it's not going to happen until we rip the band aid off and stop doing the Jedi mind trick. But yeah, that's the work that needs to happen. And that needs to happen with white people amongst themselves. But what I would say is, as white people are doing this, they need to not police black people or people of color. Stop telling us we're angry. Stop telling us we need to be more civilized. Stop telling us we need to have a break from all these social justice and race issues because it's not spiritual. Because this is the work. We don't need to speak the way that you expect us to speak. We don't need to make you comfortable. Anything that tries to make things polite, civil, and nice comes from the idea of an English tea party. That is not the rest of the world. Mind you, I love tea. That's a different thing. I mean, I adore Paddington Bear. I adore tea. I, used to adore walking around in London. I used to just walk around randomly. But yeah, no, not gonna. We're not having a tea party here, people. We're talking about lives, real lives, and life worlds that are dismissed by the fact that some people look at us and see a subhuman that they can oppress. Yeah, no, this is not the same as going to somebody's house and drinking tea. But yeah, this is, and in fact, I've really, really stirred up the shit when I shared this post on the politics of niceness amongst white women and how that's really shit. And that, completely blew people's minds, which is good. But it gets people thinking. It gets people thinking. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. So, long story short, strip away the bullshit, which is what I usually tell you each video. Strip away the bullshit. Stop trying to transcend and walk over things without actually looking at it. Stop co-opting other cultures. Stop trying to erase your identity politics by universalistic metaphysical terms that you got from some new age book. We all ain't one. If you are one, please give me your bank account information. That would be great. Or, in fact, please give it to a group supporting single black moms. That would also be great. So, until you can go to that level of oneness, enough with the bullshit. Strip it down. Look at the parts of you that are subconsciously bringing back the essence and identity of the colonizer. Look at the way you speak. Look at the way you raise your voice in a public forum. Because I kept telling this woman, honey, this is my space. I have literally told you your trauma is not what I'm talking about. And she just kept saying, I have to challenge you and blah, 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 blah. She just did not get it. And this poor woman in her own head is probably wondering, why can't I speak too? And this is why. Don't need to be colonized yet again. But I would say that I think I've covered the major linkages um, between what I wanted to say, why we need to look at this from a dramaturgical perspective, how that actually links into the psychology of different races as it is literally coded into genetic memory, and this actually explains a lot of the microaggressions that happen in the day-to-day context. I mean, yeah, when we think about it, a lot of our microaggressions can actually come to the fact that we are triggering each other because one has been told that they're worthless and the other has been told that they're king of the world or queen of the world. It's not going to work. So we've each got to actually unpack and untangle and strip away those old roles before we can actually come back to what is whiteness, what is blackness, and eventually what is rainbow. Only when white people are willing to do this can they actually restore and regenerate a culture of whiteness, if that is even needed, that is actually healthy and does not damage the person or does not damage the planet. I mean, the state the planet is in right now is proof that the colonial enterprise failed and failed miserably. But yeah, yeah, strip it down, see what's there. Start creating things, and you don't have to use somebody else's culture to do it, you know? You can just do something creatively. Now, Mayal wants to know whether this was a Saturn Pluto moment. Close, but not quite. It was, God, what was I about to say? It was Saturn Eris, actually. Saturn, Pluto, and Eris. Yes, Saturn, Pluto, and squaring Eris. That's what triggered it. Most of the time, I managed to keep my cool. And believe me, the small amount of cussing that I do here is completely unreflective of what I'm like when I'm seriously pissed off. You do not want to see that. But no, today I really found it getting under my skin, and fortunately, I could get to the root of finding a new way to actually talk about this that was productive, you know? But yeah, I'd say that connects all the dots I wanted to connect. It should get people thinking. It was also helping to help me record my thoughts on this as my brain is working together and link it together. But I would say that's probably about it. Does anyone have any questions on this that they need answering? Any angry white comments? I'm looking. Mm. No, no. I think I think this is probably a good place to wrap this up. And yeah, take care, everyone. Very many blessings. Process, think about it very, very deeply. I really appreciate everyone who is doing the work because the work needs to be done. Wendy Robinson goes, how can I not get angry? Wendy, why are you angry? You are most welcome. Ruby, Malik, Brandon, Soul Whisperer, RF. Let's see. Yes, Tamu, I said that. I find that the more I do this work, the less I give a shit, which is deeply liberating, I mean, that doesn't mean that that I take people's hearts for granted or whatever, but I don't exactly do this for the applause or for people liking what I have to say. So the more I do that, the more I actually find people do like what I have to say. So it makes sense. It works out. I used to be polite, if you can believe that. I used to be very polite. I used to be very, yes, I shall try to stick to the middle ground. I shall try to practice the politics of centrism and nobody will get hurt. And then I found that to be a load of crock. A load of crock. Okay, hang on. Wendy asks, let's see. I seem to feel like a debilitated person in giving achievement. Okay, I think this is a different situation. Um, Wendy, what I would say to you is this: if you're angry at the world, do something about it. If you're angry at yourself, do something about it. Figure out which part of you is trying to sabotage what you're trying to do in the world. If it's the world out there, get out there and do something because your anger is valid, it's legitimate. It is toxic only when it seeks to create a deepen a problem that is already there. And I hope that answers your question. Let me see. Da, 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 da. Oh, Jennifer wants to know where she can donate to the kitty fund. The kitty fund, of course, for our kitties who are sick, is www.paypal.me slash, that's me slash the sky priestess. Paypal.me slash the sky priestess. All one word. So, any other questions? Mm, I think we're good. I think we're good. And actually, Ruby brought up a really good point. It reminds me of something that someone asked when I did this on a FB Live. They're like, well, I'm white, but I've never identified with white culture, and I feel out of bounds. So what do I do? Well, it is, let's put it this way. If you are a white person who does not feel comfortable with mainstream white culture, this is a good thing. But remember that even if you don't identify with it, your body, your mannerisms, the way you speak, the way you express yourself will still have the same colonial traits. So in your case, you're one step forwards because at the very least you don't consciously identify with an ideology of supremacy, but your mannerisms, your gestures, the way you speak, the way you occupy space may unconsciously have that. So that's work that you need to observe and look at and deeply look at, especially when you're dealing with people of color. Let me see. Wendy, how to use the planetary system to achieve in life? As I am going to be saying a lot more now, I am not an astrologer, I am the sky priestess. I do not use or work with astrology in a traditional sense. The astrologer is the best defining label, but really it's a shit label for what I do. But what I would say is if you are angry because you feel that you're not making personal traction in your life, you are not going to get answers from the planets. You are only going to get answers from how you can best modulate your own free will. Any more questions that are on the topic? And just so I know, Ramsey, what's a Shire woman? Are we referring to people who are living in Middle England, or are we referring to people from Lord of the Rings? Hmm. Okay. And Wendy, no, there is no method. I'm a mystic. I sit most of the time with whatever I understand as God, and it just comes. There is no method. There is nothing that I teach. I am what I am, and people figure out shit. If you stick around long enough, you'll figure out your shit. That's why people stay here. Most of the time. Or if they really can't manage it, then I suggest a reading. Alaya asks, there's a multiracial aspect. You don't always identify as a black American, and you're not always welcome within those spaces. See, okay, here's going to be something that might make some black people angry. There is the coconut phenomenon. And I have seen this in my own family of origin. I'm not saying Alaya is a coconut, but there is definitely the coconut phenomenon, and it pisses me off to no end. Some people are white on the outside and brown on the inside, and these are the white people I get along with best because they understand the soul of that blackness. And then there are some black, brown people, or even yellow, or whatever people, who are people of color on the outside, but inside their values, their ideas, their identification is entirely white. This is coconut syndrome. So it happened. I mean, and because I know Alaya quite a bit, I read her book, um, and at least I would like to think I know her. I can see why your particular articulation of reality may seem, in some circumstances, as you're speaking that language. I don't know how you would interact with other black people, but if it's anything like your writing, maybe they may be thinking coconut syndrome. I certainly know I react very, very badly to coconuts, and I actually see a lot of them in the Indian, as in Asian Indian community in the United States. And oh, that pisses me off to no end. So let's see. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Anybody else? Anybody else? Oreo cookie. Oh, okay. Oreo cookie. Interesting. I'm going to call it coconut syndrome, but I like Oreo, so that's a good one to know. Um, okay. Yeah. I think we're cool with questions. And I hope everyone has a grasp and understanding of what I'm talking about here. Hopefully, I get around to do this. I still am moving house. Still don't know where I'm going next. But hey, I'm up doing this video because I was thinking, and then bam. But I would say that's about. Oh, hang on. When you explain your perspective comes from ancestral teaching, it still doesn't connect. Okay, if you're speaking to me in using that exact language, when you explain your perspective, I'm not saying you're wrong, but that is like speak. When I have clients who are black Americans, my language instantly changes because I must have been one of y'all's a long time ago because I remember a friend of mine, she was watching me eat, and I was just chewing on these bones. and spitting them out. And she goes, "Oh my God, that's exactly the way my grandmother used to eat." And we immediately made that connection. But it's not a linguistic thing. So when you're dealing with, with different groups, it's more of the space you connect to them from. I mean, I find the same, and I'm not like pointing at you, saying, you're doing something wrong. I have the same issue here with people of my own community because I've looked at that community from outside itself. So when I'm trying to bring back the same energy or the same, not energy, the same teachings from a different perspective, I look like an alien to them because I'm speaking a language which which they don't get and they don't understand and they don't see. Whereas when I speak in my mother tongue, there's a bit more of a connect, but the way I'm thinking about it is still analytically different. So when we're using words like perspective, coined in terminology, it's still white speak. And genetically, there is a response to it. So that may be the reason why you are seen in the that's this is a hypothesis. It's not an attack. That may be the reason why you're seen differently in those groups. Because I have felt myself change in a good way, and a different part of me comes out when I'm speaking to African Americans. Let's see. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah, the bones. Yeah, I'm just thinking, people looking at this on replay are probably wondering what on earth is she talking about. Uh, yes, Soul Whisperer. I definitely speak from outside of my culture. And I was actually the youngest trainer in this country. I went around and worked in something like 70 workshops and did work with 3,000 at-risk teenagers and children even before I began my higher education. But even then, before I went overseas, it was still very, very clear. I used an analytical language that people did not fully understand. They might have got it here, but they didn't feel it here. So people often just thought I was some kind of professor and went, "She's so cool." But they didn't really connect. Let's see. Um, AA, alcohol. Okay, hang on. Ruby says she uses the term perspective when sharing truth and opinion. This is another thing I've been thinking about. A lot of white speak is very Gemini. If you're looking at astrology, I'm probably going to write about this at some point, but it's very Gemini. I'm exploring this. This is my perspective. I've come to the understanding that, and it's all so mind focused. And Kaoya more, I completely understand African American, black people. I'm not sure which to us, which to use, so I'm using both just to be on the same side. Um, let's see. Brandon wants to know, have I ever thought about writing a book? I I am very careful about trying not to be seen as some authority of knowledge that creates a false cult and has a whole bunch of people around me worshiping me after I'm dead, because I would prefer my soul to just be gone when I go. So I actually think about the long term implications of really going big, but I might still write a book, so we will see. Coming back to the question, yeah, I think so. Yes, perspectives. There we go. See, this is the thing. There are some people who use the word perspective because they're literally trying to see things from a different point of view. And I don't say there's anything wrong with that. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who use the word perspective to sound like an absolutist, arrogant idiot and get away with it. So, if someone goes, well, if I go, "Hey, you're occupying this space is for marginalized people to speak," and you go, "Well, that's your perspective, it's not mine, and you're entitled to that." White speak, but used in a very, very colonizing way. I hope that clarifies some of the questions around that. But those are key words where if I'm talking to someone, if I don't know their face, those are key words where I go, okay, either this person is an academic or they're white or both. Okay, let's see. Yes, agreed, Ramsey. It is a very red flaggy type of word. You're most welcome, Nirmala. I'm really glad to see that you find this useful. Let's see. Hmm. Anybody else? Choo, 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 choo. No, I think we're good. Oh, hang on. There's another question. What about black people in the diaspora? Their experiences are often ignored here in English colonization culture. I cannot agree with you enough. I mean, there was a lot of interest in cultural studies when talking about the diaspora, whether it was the African diaspora, whether it was the Indian diaspora, and then all of a sudden we were multicultural, all of a sudden we were post colonial, all of a sudden we were post structural, and then the academic interest in this lessened, especially when it came to ethnographic, with the exception of ethnographic work and very, very selective studies of sociology. But I would actually say that this is where black culture in itself needs to identify what it is and evolve in unique ways. I mean, for example, black culture in the States is not going to be the same, exactly the same as black culture in Trinidad and Tobago, and it doesn't need to be. So it's about finding your space, stripping away your slave, overlord, epigenetics, and bullshit, and just being whatever the heck you are. And when we are able to do that, we um, we come back to a sense of what is humanness, you know? Now, Alaya wants to know what's the best term to use? Lens, POV? Girl, are you sure you're not white? I mean, when I'm dealing with a group of black women, I don't need to say anything. It's a feeling. You create an experience where you just know, you know? And when I'm with a group of white women, there's a different feeling. I think my soul has been around for a while and has just experienced different cultures. It's not something I wear, just something that happens. It's not a term, it's an experience. Look at your shared experiences. Um, yeah, it's a feeling. It's like bam. It was like that friend looking at me going, the, the way you eat the bones. It's exactly the way my grandmother did. And bam, we just connected and we could open up to each other in a very powerful way. Hmm. But yeah, I think we're good. Oh, here we go. Another question. Feather Spirit Tarot. I wonder if we could find astrology correlations in our charts of Pluto transformation and purging this from our bloodline. Literally, that's what it's about. Pluto and Capricorn. We need to dig deep and get out of all of this structural shit. Ideally, we need to find, ideally, we need to find a way to just pass down energy and knowledge in ways that are not controlling. I mean, if you want to get into controlling ancestral dynamics, you don't look to white people, you look to Asia. Look to India and Asia. We got our own issues there. Um, so, Nirmala Nataraj says she often feels internalized white supremacy is all about knowing the right words, attempting to get it right. In that case, I am guilty of that. But I would perhaps reshape that a little bit if you didn't mind. Perhaps it's about finding the right resonance. There's a difference between trying to get into resonance by describing something with a word as opposed to nailing it down, putting it in a box, and putting it up there and owning it. That, I would say, for me at the very least, is more about how white supremacy operates through discourse and dialogue. It is about the ownership, the spell of ownership. I mean, if you look at the way nation states were created and unceded lands and territories seceded, it was the spell of the words. They were not right, they were authoritative. Here we go. Solrat Kaba says that she's wanted, I'm not sure if it's a male or female. This person is wanted to connect to your sisters from other ethnic related cultures, but they seem blocked. What we were talking about earlier in the in the beginning of this video is what looks like a block or what looks like defensiveness can also be genetic triggering, because we may actually be triggering each other with subconscious cues and words that make us feel like we are in the presence of a threat or a presence of a person who's a pushover. So, maybe you might, if you haven't been following this from the beginning, maybe you want to go back to the video. Uh, let's see. Cosmos Creations. In India, do Indians of light color also looking down on highly melanated people? Yes. One of the worst things that you can do is look at a paper and look at the marriage classifieds. And there they'll go, looking for fair skinned girl. And I get the right to mock the accent, okay? Looking for fair skinned girl with wheatish complexion, 5'4", must be educated, must cook well, must be good girl of good family values. And it will be something like that. It will be every single ad will be about how the girl has to be a certain height, a certain appearance, a certain complexion, and you will never find a single ad that wants a dark skinned person. So no, even if you just look at the reality of India, there are so many people with different shades of color, but the way they're represented is completely different. They're whiter than white people. Let's put it that way. Um, Yes, it's utterly, colorism is an utterly disgusting thing. Da, 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 da. Yes, and it is absolute mental slavery. Yes, Ramsey, fair and lovely markets are huge in Asia. China, India, Southeast Asia, they tried getting me to use it. Even as a teenager, I was like, no, no, thank you. No, thank you. And so, which is why I also mentioned earlier, there is the coconut phenomenon. The coloring cream is just trying to catch up with what's on the inside. Let's put it that way. Varsha, I'm so sorry to hear you were told that you were too dark by a marital prospect. That is a shitty thing to hear, and thankfully, you escaped. Let's just put it that way. Anyone who rejected you on the basis of your skin color is a moron. Moron. Oh my God. So you're a medical doctor and you're not a good bride because you were dark. That's just bullshit, but unfortunately, that's also India. Okay, but I think I'm going to wrap it up. It is getting late and I have been speaking for about an hour. But I think you guys get you get the idea. You get the idea. There's a lot for everybody to reflect on. And hopefully, all of the angry white people can actually go, oh shit, she actually did manage to do what we challenged her to do. And she did manage to find something for us to think about. Damn, whatever will I complain about next? One more question, I think. As we try to honor the sacred anger being expressed in dialogue with people that carry this wound of colonization, when does it become verbally abusive versus proactive? That's a very good question. I would say, like the woman I was fighting with today kept claiming that I was throwing venom at her, but honestly, I the worst thing I said was to open her fucking eyes. That's probably the worst thing that I said. And I would say I'm actually quite tame in that. Um, but yeah, when does it become verbally abusive? Now, I've actually had experiences with people of color who felt at the time that I was not representing them, and I really, really got abused by him. And at some point, it became a whole gang up on this person who dares to actually have a following and brown skin, even by women of brown skin as well. But from that experience, I can tell you that there is a point after which the anger just becomes toxic. Um, and that is when that person is, how do I put it? Just give me a sec, I'll think about this. When it becomes truly ad hominem, in the sense that it's no, on the one hand, I can get very, very angry with the category of white people, especially when I see someone perpetuating privilege and, often being an asshole about it. But when you try to bring that back to the individual person, calling them a fraud, calling them a sham, calling them a gold digger, calling them whatever, when you try to actually bring that to the individual person in a way that is designed to make them break down, that is when I would say the line has definitely been crossed. Um, yeah, I would say that's the way I would say it. Sometimes you do need to look at a person to see their credentials. Are they actually what they're saying they are? Are they faking it? But sometimes a person's story is used against them in hideous ways just because the other person can't say something without trying to rip you apart. So that's not helpful. That is toxic anger. That is a real line that has to be drawn. But unfortunately, a lot of white people look at very legitimate anger and call it toxic because they don't want to look at themselves. Buddhas and Butterflies asks, do you think that truth is being preserved as venom because it cuts too close to the bone? I think that a lot of what a lot of white people say is venom is actually the truth they need. Sometimes this does go overboard, too far. I completely accept that, but you're not going to find that with me, at the very least. And there's a lot of really good moderators out there and facilitators out there who are speaking this truth and who are being attacked for it and who are actually very, very tame about this subject, but you know, they're still projecting very angrily upon us. To be honest, it's not the angry black woman anymore. It's probably. Hello! Hello? Hello? Can people see me again? Am I seen? No? Yay. Hello again. Hello again. Dramatically. I'll be honest with you. I think my telecommunication devices are a little dramatic. They just wanted me to do a mic drop, so the phone died, but I just got it back on. But anyway, I think we were wrapping up anyway. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again, so don't worry. Maybe it is technology, maybe it is YouTube. There is something going on a little bit weirdly with this tech. And I'm sure people trying to watch the replay are going to be frustrated. But if you've hung in here, you've learned a lot. So take care. Very, very many blessings to everybody. Lots and lots of love to everyone. It's all good. We are all human beings and we are all trying to figure this shit out. Just remember, when you bring yourself to a conversation, what are you perpetuating? Whether or not you realize it. That's the key question to ask yourselves. And if you've got that in your mind, your heart, your soul, and an understanding of body language, you are that much closer to being able to speak in a way that can connect to all. So, cha cha for now. Lots and lots and lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.